Welcome to week 23 of our preaching teaching series, Unpacking Red Gone White. This week's message is called Living Lies with Meaning. If you've been following these messages, you'll notice that we've come to a bend in the road. We are still moving forward, but in a slightly different direction. Last week we concluded a 9-week segment on things we need to embrace as children of God. This week we start another 9-week segment on what life is like as children of God. If you're just discovering this unique and powerful series, welcome. And I'm Apostle David Anderson of Red Gone White Church, where transformation begins. To learn more about Red Gone White and why I'm taking 40 weeks to unpack it, click a link in the description portion called The Story Behind the Name. I decided to take a completely different approach with this week's lesson. Usually I will present a thought and pull scripture references from all over the Bible to underscore or elaborate on what I'm presenting to you. Instead, this week, I will focus on a single book in the Bible. Our topic is Living Lies with Meaning. As I pondered how I would communicate what needs to be said, it dawned on me that the wisest man to ever walk the earth, not counting Jesus, already wrote a fantastic book about this same topic. I'm referring to none other than King Solomon, King David's son. He's the author of the Book of Ecclesiastes, given the name because it is the book of the teacher. In his day, rulers from around the world would travel and pay fortunes just to sit at his feet and listen to the wisdom that would fall from his mouth. He also wrote a book of poetry and imagery called the Song of Solomon. And he wrote most of the book of the Proverbs and many of the chapters in the book of Psalms. Per capita, he is considered the wealthiest man to have ever lived. He was born the son of a king and became a king and was granted supernatural wisdom from God and long life and unheard of success and riches. It was under his leadership that Solomon's temple was built, arguably one of the most beautiful temples ever constructed. I say all of this to say that if anyone had the means and the opportunity to squeeze all that this life has to offer, it was Solomon. And yet, in a nutshell, he teaches that nothing in this world will satisfy us and that all we will ever do is vanity and a chasing after the wind. I am here teaching on living lives with meaning. I've chosen to let Solomon take the lead on this. And yet, all he has to say is that life is meaningless. Stay with me on this, and I promise that it will make sense. But it is time to hear from the man himself. After we hear Solomon establish that all is vanity, I wish to list 10 different specific illustrations that he chose in order to make his point. So Ecclesiastes 1:14 says, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed, all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Ecclesiastes 2:11 says, Then I looked on all the works my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and a grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. If you've never read the book of Ecclesiastes, even after my overview, it would be a fantastic use of your time to do so. But next, let's look at where meaning is not found. Many of the items on this list are exactly where most of us seek and assume to find our meaning. Let me list them together at a glance, and then we will quickly go through their reference in Solomon's book, and I will offer a quick commentary. Remember, I aim to keep all of these messages under 15 minutes. However, this one will go a little long, but let's go. Let's call this a list of vanities. 1. Human wisdom. 2. Human labor. 3. Goodness before God. 4. Success. 5. Greed and accumulation of things. 6. Fame. 7. Wealth. 8. Coveting. 9. Foolish living. And 10. Avoiding our appointment with death. So here we go. 1. Human wisdom. Solomon says, what's the point? The wise and the foolish die and still suffer and still get buried. They are the same. Ecclesiastes 2:15 and 16 say, So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity. Verse 16, For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. 2. Human labor. Oftentimes we find and blur our identity, purpose, and meaning in what we do for work. When people ask who we are, we usually tell them what we do. When Solomon reflected on the very many accomplishments done through his toiling and hard work, here's what he had to say. Ecclesiastes 2:17 through 20 say, Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Verse 18, Then I hated all my labor, in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. Verse 19, And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will rule over all my labor, in which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. Verse 20, Therefore I turned my heart, and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. 3. Goodness before God. Many of us believe that we are basically good. We spend our lives trying to be good, act good, be more good than our fellow man. Solomon will teach that yes, there are some benefits to being good, at least good before God. But at the end of the day, it is still vanity. It is still meaningless. It won't really matter because when we die, we're still buried, whether we were good or bad. Ecclesiastes 2:26 says, For God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. 4. Success. People love to succeed because we think it will make us popular and receive the love and admiration of others. However, Solomon paints a very different picture. Ecclesiastes 4:4 says, Again, I saw that for all toil and skillful work, a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. The more we try to rise and lift our heads above the crowd, the more they will grab onto us and only try to pull us back down to their level once again. 5. Greed and accumulation of things. A modern slogan for success is, He with the most toys wins. However, that mentality creates a form of quicksand. The more we strive, the more trapped we become, and the deeper and faster we sink. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 4:8, There is one alone, without companion. He has neither son nor brother. He's talking about a spirit of selfishness. Yet there is no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches, but he never asks, For whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. That greed mentality will leave us isolated, exhausted, deprived, unsatisfied, and ironically empty. 6. Fame. Even if we lay hold of position, power, and or fame, it is short-lived at best. And instead of making us popular, it probably costs us more quality relationships and friends than it earned us. On the other side of it, we become yesterday's news and are quickly forgotten. Ecclesiastes 4:13 through 16 say, "Better a poor and wise youth than an old foolish king who will be admonished no more." Verse 14, "For he comes out of prison to be a king, although he was born poor in his kingdom." Verse 15, "I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place." Verse 16, "There was no end to all the people over whom he was made king, yet those who came afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind." 7. Wealth. When it comes to money, more is never enough. A great illustration of this is the farmer who, when asked what does he consider success, he said, "I don't require much. I only want to own whatever piece of land touches mine." Picture that for a moment, and you will see that it will be impossible for him to satisfy his definition of success and wealth. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase." This also is vanity. 8. Coveting. Coveting is so much part of our human nature that God addressed it as one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not covet. What is coveting? It is wishing for, longing for, wanting and or desiring something or someone that belongs to somebody else. Many of us have probably heard the modern-day proverb, "A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush." We should spend more time and energy appreciating what we already have instead of wishing for what we may never have. Solomon put it this way in Ecclesiastes 6:9, "Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind." 9. Foolish living. Fools only ever want to sing, play, break and ignore the rules, and never suffer. But wisdom is gained through trials, trouble, and tribulation. Foolish living ultimately only ruins our lives. Ecclesiastes 7:4 through 6 say, "The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of myrrh," or merriment. Verse 5, "It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools." Verse 6, "For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of a fool. This also is vanity." 10. Avoiding our appointment with death. There is no point in living our lives in fear or stress, wondering about or trying to prolong the day until we die. Ultimately, we will die. It is unavoidable. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 9:2 and 3, "All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes an oath, as he who fears an oath." Verse 3, "This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to all. Truly the hearts of the sons of man are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead." If none of these things point to or hold the meaning of living, then what does? When we actually read Ecclesiastes, we can't help but notice the phrase, under the sun. Solomon is saying that if our eyes and expectations focus on this world, then we will always come up short. We have to look not under the sun, but above and beyond the sun for our answers. Meaning in this life is not just found in the heavenly realms, as in above the sun, but in God Himself, as in with the sun, the S-O-N. We will elaborate more on this in the weeks to come. But for now, let's see what Solomon has to say about this. Ecclesiastes 11:9 and 10 say, Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Verse 10, Therefore remove sorrow from your heart, and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Ecclesiastes 12:11 is very interesting and points specifically to Jesus. Jesus is the Lord, the Good Shepherd. Jesus is the personification of wisdom. He is the Word itself. And yet, Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 12:11, The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. Goads were points on the tip of the shepherd's staff. They were used to poke and prod the sheep when necessary to move them along, to motivate them into action. And nails firmly establish and set a thing. So wisdom and knowledge from God move us and establish us. Ecclesiastes 8:12 and 13 say, Though a sinner does evil 100 times, and his days are prolonged, yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before Him. Verse 13, But it will not be well with the wicked, nor will he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he did not fear before God. Finally, in the last two verses of the last chapter, Solomon leaves no room for doubt as he makes it clear where we truly find meaning. This is what matters the most in life. Ecclesiastes 12:13 and 14 say, Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments. For this is man's all. Verse 14, For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. So, only what we do with, for, under, by, and in God matters. Only those things endure. Meaning in life is found in what is good in the sight of God. I know this went a little long for this week, but this lays the foundation for the second half of this series. We have 17 messages ahead of us, and Solomon did an amazing job setting the table. Join us next week as we elaborate on this message. It is called Living and Knowing the Meaning of Life. This is Apostle David Anderson of Red Gone White Church, where transformation